There is a warning hidden inside the writings of Miyamoto Musashi that few people understand today. It is not a warning about enemies. It is not a warning about war. It is not even a warning about failure. It is a warning about comfort. Musashi believed that the greatest threat to a man is not what attacks him from the outside, but what weakens him from within. And nothing weakens a man more quietly than a life built around ease. The danger of comfort is that it does not arrive as an enemy. It arrives as a reward. It feels pleasant. It feels deserved. It feels harmless. Yet year after year, it slowly takes something from you. Your discipline becomes weaker. Your judgment becomes softer. Your will becomes less reliable. By the time most people notice what has happened, they no longer recognize the person they once hoped to become. Musashi saw this centuries ago, and his warning is more relevant today than ever. Chapter 1. The Silent Erosion. There was a man named Kenji. He was not a warrior. He was not a monk. He was simply an ordinary man living an ordinary life. In his youth, he possessed ambition. He woke early. He studied diligently. He challenged himself. He dreamed of becoming someone strong, capable, and respected. But as the years passed, something changed. Nothing dramatic happened. There was no disaster, no tragedy, no sudden collapse. Instead, life became comfortable. He began choosing convenience over effort. He delayed difficult tasks until tomorrow. He spent more time seeking entertainment than seeking growth. Small compromises became habits. Habits became character. At first, the changes seemed insignificant, but comfort rarely destroys a man in a single moment. It works slowly, like water wearing down stone. Years later, Kenji found himself looking at his life with a strange sense of disappointment. He had not failed. Yet he had not become who he once intended to be. He felt weaker than his younger self, despite having more experience. He could not understand why. The answer was hidden in the choices he barely remembered making. Every comfortable decision had seemed harmless. Together, they had reshaped his identity. This is the danger Musashi warned about. Most people imagine weakness as something dramatic. They imagine laziness, cowardice, or surrender. But true weakness often arrives disguised as comfort. It appears in the path of least resistance. It whispers that discipline can wait. It encourages delay, indulgence, and excuses. And little by little, a man loses himself. Chapter 2. Musashi's Path. Miyamoto. Musashi lived during one of the most turbulent periods in Japanese history. He fought countless duels. He survived battles. He wandered alone for much of his life, seeking mastery not only over combat but over himself. What made Musashi extraordinary was not merely his skill with a sword, it was his understanding of human nature. He understood that victory begins long before conflict appears. A warrior who only trains when motivated cannot be trusted. A warrior who seeks comfort whenever difficulty arises cannot be relied upon. A warrior who avoids hardship eventually becomes controlled by hardship. Musashi's life was built upon voluntary discomfort. He traveled alone. He endured uncertainty. He accepted simplicity. He repeatedly placed himself in situations that demanded adaptation and resilience. This was not punishment, it was training. He understood that every challenge strengthened something invisible: the mind, the spirit, the capacity to remain steady under pressure. Many people today misunderstand discomfort. They see it as an obstacle. Musashi saw it as a forge. The sword becomes stronger through fire. The warrior becomes stronger through resistance. Without resistance, nothing develops. Without challenge, nothing sharpens. Without hardship, there is no mastery. Chapter 3. The Addiction. Nobody notices. Most addictions are obvious. People recognize addictions to substances, gambling, or destructive behaviors. But comfort creates a far more socially acceptable addiction. The addiction to ease, the addiction to avoiding difficulty, the addiction to feeling good right now. This addiction is rarely discussed because it often looks normal. Everyone seeks convenience. Everyone avoids discomfort when possible. Everyone tells themselves they deserve a break. Yet the mind gradually adapts to whatever standards it repeatedly experiences. When discomfort disappears from life, resilience disappears with it. When challenges are constantly avoided, confidence begins to erode. A man may still appear successful. He may possess money, status, and possessions, But internally, he becomes dependent upon favorable conditions. He requires comfort to function. He requires certainty to act. He requires motivation to begin. And because life can never guarantee these things, he becomes fragile. Musashi would have recognized this immediately. He knew that true strength is not measured by what a man can do under perfect conditions. True strength is measured by what remains when conditions become difficult. Chapter 4. The Warrior and the Storm. There is an old lesson found throughout Japanese philosophy. The bamboo bends during the storm. The rigid tree breaks. Strength is not the absence of hardship. Strength is the ability to endure it without losing oneself. One evening, after another disappointing day, Kenji sat alone reflecting on his life. For the first time, he stopped blaming circumstances. He stopped blaming bad luck. He stopped blaming other people. Instead, he examined his habits honestly. He realized something uncomfortable. His greatest enemy had never been outside him. His enemy had been his attachment to comfort. He had trained himself to seek ease. He had conditioned himself to avoid resistance. And as a result, he had slowly weakened the very qualities he admired most. This realization was painful, but it was also liberating, because if comfort had shaped him, new habits could reshape him again. The path forward was not complicated, it was simply difficult, and that made all the difference. Chapter 5. The Discipline of Small Hardships. Many people believe transformation requires dramatic action. They imagine radical changes, grand declarations, extreme sacrifices. Japanese philosophy often teaches something different. Small actions performed consistently create powerful change. Kaizen, the philosophy of continuous improvement, is built upon this principle. The warrior does not become strong through occasional heroic effort. The warrior becomes strong through daily discipline. Kenji began making small changes. He woke when he said he would wake. He completed tasks before seeking entertainment. He embraced silence instead of constant distraction. He chose effort when convenience was available. The actions themselves seemed insignificant, but something deeper was happening. Each action became evidence. Evidence that he could trust himself. Evidence that discomfort no longer controlled him. Evidence that discipline was returning. Musashi understood this principle deeply. Character is not built through intentions. Character is built through repeated actions. Every choice casts a vote for the person you are becoming. Every act of discipline strengthens identity. Every act of avoidance weakens it. Chapter 6. The Cost of Seeking Ease. The modern world offers comfort everywhere. Instant entertainment, instant communication, instant gratification. The problem is not that these things exist. The problem is that many people never leave them. They spend years surrounded by convenience without realizing what they are sacrificing. Comfort often takes more than it gives. It gives temporary pleasure, but it frequently takes courage. It takes patience. It takes resilience. It takes self-respect. The greatest tragedy is that the loss happens gradually. A man rarely notices the moment he becomes weaker. He only notices years later when he faces a challenge and discovers that he no longer possesses the strength he assumed he had. Musashi's warning was never about rejecting all comfort. It was about refusing to become dependent upon it. The warrior remains free because he can function without favorable conditions. His strength belongs to him. It does not depend on circumstances. Chapter 7. Dokkōdō. Near the end of his life, Musashi wrote Dokkōdō, The Way of Walking Alone. These principles were not written for battlefields. They were written for life itself. Many of the teachings point toward a profound truth. Attachment creates weakness. Dependence creates vulnerability. Freedom requires discipline. Musashi repeatedly encouraged detachment from desires, luxuries, and unnecessary comforts, not because pleasure is evil, but because dependence limits freedom. A man controlled by comfort is not truly free. His choices become dictated by what feels good rather than what is right. His actions become guided by convenience rather than principle. Musashi understood that mastery begins when a person can act according to purpose rather than preference. This distinction changes everything. Preference seeks comfort. Purpose accepts difficulty. Preference seeks immediate relief. Purpose seeks long-term growth. Preference asks what feels easy. Purpose asks, what must be done? Chapter 8. Returning to the path. Months passed. Kenji's life was still imperfect. Challenges remained, difficulties remained, uncertainty remained, yet something fundamental had changed. He no longer feared discomfort. He no longer treated hardship as an enemy. Instead, he viewed challenges as opportunities to strengthen himself. The obstacles that once frustrated him became training. The resistance he once avoided became valuable. His confidence returned, not because life became easier, but because he became stronger. This is the paradox that Musashi understood. The pursuit of comfort often creates weakness. The acceptance of discomfort often creates peace. When a man stops running from difficulty, difficulty loses much of its power over him. The mind becomes calmer. The spirit becomes steadier. The path becomes clearer. Final reflection. Miyamoto Musashi left behind many lessons, but few are as important as this warning. The man who seeks comfort above all else eventually loses himself, not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly, one compromise at a time, one avoidance at a time, one easy decision at a time. Yet the opposite is also true. The man who willingly embraces necessary discomfort gradually discovers something extraordinary. He discovers strength he did not know he possessed. He discovers discipline that does not depend on motivation. He discovers a quiet confidence that cannot be purchased, borrowed, or given by others. The warrior's path was never about suffering for its own sake. It was about refusing to become a servant of comfort. Because the moment comfort becomes your master, your freedom begins to disappear. Musashi understood this. The samurai understood this. And perhaps the question that remains is simple. What part of your life has comfort quietly taken from you? And what might happen if, beginning today, you chose the harder path not because it is difficult, but because it leads you back to yourself?